You open your eyes for the very first time, not in some royal nursery or cozy cottage, but in a strass-stuffed bed that smells faintly of turnips and regret. Congratulations, you've been born in the Middle Ages, which already means life is going to be short, itchy, and suspiciously damp. But don't worry, fate has plans for you. Big plans. The kind that involve lace, locked doors, and a man in a crown who calls you his property before breakfast. Yes, you lucky you are destined to become a medieval concubine, which is basically a polite way of saying royal side piece. Your village will whisper about your beauty. Your parents will whisper about the dowry they'll never afford. And one day, a soldier in the king's colors will arrive on horseback and invite you to the castle. You'll go, of course. Who says no to a royal summons? Inside, you'll trade mud floors for marble ones, hunger for honey cakes, and freedom for a gilded cage. You'll learn that perfume can't cover fear, and silk sheets can still feel like chains. Being a medieval concubine sounds glamorous, until you realize your life depends on a man who already has a wife, a dozen rivals, and a suspiciously large dungeon. Welcome to court life, sweetheart. Hope you like drama, jealousy, and medieval birth control methods that involve prayers and herbal guesswork. Because here, beauty doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you replaceable. You grow up in a world that smells like smoke, sweat, and sheep. The year is something like 1347, or maybe 1370. No one's quite sure, because calendars are for monks, and you can't read anyway. Your childhood toys? Mud pies, sticks, and the occasional rat that wasn't fast enough. If you're lucky, you were born to peasants who at least own their mud hut. If not, your family works someone else's land, breaking their backs for a lord who's never even bothered to learn your name. Life is a steady rhythm of chores, prayers, and fleas. Still, people notice you. Not your charm or your witty conversation, because literacy rates are zero and sarcasm hasn't been invented yet, but your face. You're beautiful. And in medieval Europe, that's not a blessing. It's a curse with eyeliner. Every time you fetch water, someone stares too long. Every time you pass the market, someone whispers. Even the priest hesitates a bit longer when giving you communion. It's not your fault. You were just born with cheekbones sharp enough to threaten the patriarchy. Then, one unlucky day, a messenger arrives. He's wearing royal colors, smells faintly of horse, and smiles like someone delivering bad news with good manners. The king, or maybe one of his noble friends, has taken interest in you. Your parents? Overjoyed. They think this means gold, security, maybe even a future at court. You're too young to understand that a future at court is medieval code for a future as property. Within days, you're scrubbed clean, dressed in borrowed silk, and placed on a wagon headed to the royal castle. You leave behind the only life you've known, the dirt path you walked barefoot, the cottage that leaked when it rained, the mother who held you too tightly that morning. As the castle walls rise in the distance, towering and cold, you feel something you can't quite name. Fear? Excitement? Maybe both. The air smells of roasted meat and expensive sin. Inside the gates, everything glitters: candles, armor, gold. You've stepped into another world, one where people wear perfumes instead of sweat and smile with their teeth closed. But beneath all the sparkle, you sense something else: danger. Because in this world, your value isn't in your heart, or your mind, or your dreams. It's in your skin. You're told to stand still, to bow when spoken to smile, but not too much. The queen's eyes linger on you for exactly 1 second, too long enough to tell you that she already hates you, and she's right to. That night, as you lie in a soft bed for the first time in your life, surrounded by silk sheets and strangers, you realize the cruelest truth of all. You've escaped poverty, but you've walked straight into captivity. Your new life begins at dawn. A servant wakes you with a jug of cold water and the kind of tone reserved for livestock. She doesn't introduce herself because you don't deserve a name yet. You're just the new girl. Before breakfast, you're bathed, perfumed, and dressed in fabrics you've never touched before. Silk, velvet, lace, each layer feels like it belongs to someone else's body. When they tighten your corset, you can barely breathe. That's intentional. A concubine who breathes too easily might speak too freely. Then the training begins. They call it etiquette, but it's really obedience disguised as elegance. You learn to bow low enough to bruise your pride, to pour wine without trembling, and to smile even when the jokes aren't funny, especially when the jokes aren't funny. Your instructor is a sharp-eyed older woman, one who's seen dozens of girls like you come and go. Her voice is calm, but her words cut deep. You are not here to think. You are here to please. She teaches you how to walk slow, graceful, controlled, as though you're gliding on glass. You must never run, never raise your voice, never look directly at a man unless he allows it. A misplaced glance can be mistaken for defiance, and defiance is dangerous. Every mistake earns punishment. A slap for clumsy table manners. A night without food for speaking out of turn. One girl disappears after she laughs too loudly during supper. No one asks where she went. You all just lower your eyes and keep practicing. Soon, you're introduced to the real lessons, the ones whispered in candlelit rooms when the men are away. You're told how to make conversation, how to flatter without sounding false, how to act surprised when someone touches you, even if it isn't the first time. It's a theater of submission. And you're being sculpted into the perfect actress. Days blur into weeks. You start to forget what fresh air smells like. You forget the sound of your mother's voice. The castle becomes your entire world, one where your worth is measured by how well you can pretend to enjoy being powerless. But there's one part of you they can't quite erase: your mind. You start to notice things, the way the queen's smile fades when the king enters, the way guards look away when the nobles drink too much. Power, you realize, isn't always in crowns or swords. Sometimes it's in knowing when to stay silent and when to listen. Still, the reality is cruel. You are being groomed for one purpose only: to entertain, to obey, and eventually, to belong to a man who will never truly see you as human. At night, when everyone sleeps, you stare out of the window at the moonlight glinting off the castle walls. You wonder if anyone outside even remembers your name. You whisper a small prayer, not for freedom, but for strength. Because deep down, you already understand something the nobles don't. They may control your body, but only you can choose what becomes of your soul. You've officially arrived. The Great Hall welcomes you with golden chandeliers, marble floors, and the thick, suffocating scent of perfume and power. You are introduced to the court not as a woman, but as the king's newest concubine. Every eye in the room sizes you up like a rare jewelry or a fresh piece of meat. The queen doesn't even bother to hide her disdain. She looks at you with a kind of calm fury that says, "I can't kill you, but I wish I could." You bow lower than you ever have before, and when you rise, you smile the trained smile, the one that hides the fact that your stomach is twisting into knots. At first, it feels like you've made it. Silk gowns, feasts with honeyed wine, a bed softer than anything you've ever slept on. You even start to forget what hunger felt like. For a few days, you trick yourself into believing this life could be comfortable, maybe even safe. But comfort in the palace is a trap, because every gift comes with invisible chains. You soon realize that the palace isn't a place of peace, it's a battlefield dressed in velvet. The other concubines aren't friends, they're rivals. Each one smiles sweetly to your face, then whispers poison behind your back. One warns you, "Don't sit too close to the king." The others might think you're getting ideas. Another hisses, "Be careful what you eat. Accidents happen in kitchens." And then there's the king himself, the man everyone fears, but no one truly respects. His mood swings like a sword in the dark. One night, he's charming and generous, telling stories by the fire. The next, he's cruel and unpredictable, demanding affection like it's a royal decree. You learn to read him like the weather. The twitch of his jaw means danger. The sigh before a meal means silence. Every evening is a performance. You laugh when he laughs. You pretend to listen when he rants about wars you don't understand. You pour his wine carefully, never spilling a drop, because even that could be an insult. But behind the glittering facade, the reality is ugly. You watch friends vanish overnight, One is sent to a distant estate, another is found asleep in her chamber, never to wake. Rumors say the queen's ladies-in-waiting handle such matters quietly. You keep your head down and your lips sealed. That's the only way to survive. Still, the loneliness eats at you. You begin to forget who you were before all this, the girl with dreams. The girl who once laughed without fear. Now, you measure time by the king's moods and the queen's glances. Some nights, when the court grows silent, you wander the corridors barefoot, tracing your fingers along the cold stone walls. The air smells of wax and secrets. You overhear whispers about political plots, forbidden romances, even the king's declining health. That's when a dangerous thought creeps in. Maybe your beauty isn't your only weapon. Maybe knowledge could be your shield. You start paying attention, memorizing who speaks to whom, who avoids whose gaze. You begin to collect secrets like a magpie collecting silver. Quietly, patiently. It's the only kind of power available to you in a world that never wanted you to have any. Because here's the truth, they never told you during training. A concubine isn't just decoration. She's a witness to everything powerful men try to hide. And in a castle full of lies, being invisible can be the most dangerous thing of all. By now, you've mastered the art of survival. You smile when expected, flatter when needed, and pretend you don't notice the way power rots everyone it touches. You've learned that in this court, truth is poison and silence is currency. But silence has its own cost. One winter evening, the king falls ill. The whispers begin immediately. Poison, curse, divine punishment, take your pick. You're summoned to his bedside like a loyal pet. His skin is pale, his hands tremble, and he looks more mortal than ever before. He grips your wrist and croaks, "You'll take care of me, won't you?" You nod, of course. What else can you do? He's the reason you're still breathing. But as the days pass and his fever worsens, you begin to see what comes next. The vultures circling, the power shifting, the knives sharpening behind smiles. The queen visits him daily now, her face carved from stone. She doesn't speak to you, but her eyes say enough when he's gone, you'll be next. And she's not wrong. Because in the medieval world, a concubine without her protector is like a bird without wings. The moment the king dies, your value dies with him. You hear stories of what happens to women like you, banishment to convents, mysterious disappearances, or worse, being handed off to the next noble like a piece of leftover property. You try to prepare. You stash away a few coins, a ring, a small dagger hidden in the folds of your dress. It's not much, but it's something. Then one night, you're summoned to the great hall. The king is dead, and the court looks hungrier than ever. The queen sits at the head of the table, now calm, commanding, dangerous. She doesn't need to raise her voice to destroy you. She only needs to nod. "You've served your purpose," she says, her tone flat. "You may leave the palace at dawn." It sounds merciful, but everyone knows what that really means. Exile. You bow low, thanking her through gritted teeth. You want to scream, but you've been trained not to. Even in disgrace, you must remain graceful. That night, you pack your few belongings. You pause by the mirror, the same one you used to admire yourself in when the world seemed easier. Now, your reflection barely recognizes you. Your eyes look older, colder, wiser. You've seen too much. But before dawn, there's a knock at your door. It's one of the younger concubines, trembling, wide-eyed. She slips you a piece of parchment sealed with wax. A name is written on it. A nobleman you once saw whispering in the shadows. "He says he can protect you," she whispers, "if you meet him at the stables." You hesitate. It could be a trap, but staying means certain death. So you go. At the stables, the air is cold enough to bite. You clutch your cloak tight and step into the darkness. A horse waits. A man too. But not the one you expected. It's the Queen's guard. "Her Majesty sends her regards," he says, raising his sword. You freeze. Instinct takes over. You reach for the hidden dagger, slash wildly, and somehow, by some cruel miracle, you survive. You flee into the forest, breath ragged, heart pounding. You don't know how long you run. Hours? Days? All you know is freedom feels colder than you imagined. When you finally stop, you collapse beneath a tree, trembling, bleeding, but alive. For the first time in years, there's no one to command you. No one to dress you, beat you, or buy you. Just silence. And in that silence, something breaks, but something else is born. You laugh. Not a joyful laugh, but the hollow laugh of someone who finally understands how absurd it all was. The gowns, the jewels, the false affection, all of it. Just another kind of prison. Because in the end, being a concubine was never about love. It was about survival. And survival always has a price. The forest becomes your home. Days blur into nights, and nights stretch endlessly beneath the cold stars. You scavenge for berries, drink from streams, sleep beneath trees that don't care who you once were. You've traded silk for dirt, comfort for hunger, and a gilded cage for a world that doesn't even know your name. But strangely, it feels real. You learn to start fires with flint and patience. You learn the sound of your own breathing. For the first time, no one owns you. No one watches. No one commands. And yet, freedom tastes bittersweet. Because when you're alone long enough, your memories become ghosts. You see the faces of the girls you trained with the ones who vanished one by one. You remember the king's laughter, the queen's cold stare, the endless rehearsals of obedience that made you who you are. You thought leaving would erase them, but they follow you, whispering through every gust of wind. Then, one morning, while foraging near a small village, you hear something strange music, a festival, laughter. For a moment, it feels like another world entirely. You wander closer, hood drawn, invisible among peasants. At the center of the crowd, a minstrel sings, a tale of the king who sinned and the concubine who vanished in sin. Your heart freezes. They've turned your suffering into entertainment. Children laugh. Men nod, saying, "That's what happens to women who play too close to power." The audience claps. Coins rain into the minstrel's hat. And you realize the cruelest truth of all. History never remembers women like you. It rewrites you as a villain, a temptress, a nameless cautionary tale. That night, you sit by your fire and stare at the flames until they blur into tears. You wonder if your life meant anything beyond surviving. But then, something inside you hardens not bitterness, but clarity. If the world will never tell your story truthfully, maybe you'll tell it yourself. So you find a quill, a scrap of parchment, ink stolen from a merchant's wagon. You write by moonlight, your hand shaking, words spilling out like confession. I was not a queen, I was not a saint. I was a concubine, and I lived. You write everything, the beauty, the horror, the laughter that masked pain, the women who never got to escape. You write so that maybe, someday, someone will find your story and see the truth. That even in the darkest systems, there were women who thought, who felt, who fought quietly. When dawn comes, you fold the parchment and hide it in the hollow of a tree. You whisper, "May someone find it when the world is kinder." Then you stand, cloak wrapped tight, and walk toward the horizon. No guards, no masters, no chains. Just a broken woman carrying the one thing they could never train out of her, her will. Because maybe that's what freedom really is. Not comfort, not safety, but the choice to live on your own terms. And as the morning light spills across your face, you finally understand it never sucked to be a concubine. It sucked to be born into a world that never gave you a choice.